for quite a few students. The governor did recently announce that she is encouraging all school districts to return to some type of in-person learning by March 1st. So to talk a little bit more about that, we're going to bring in Dr. James Schwarz. He's the superintendent for Avondale School District. Thank you for being with us.
Sure. Thank you for having me.
PJ days are gone.
Well, for some, we're moving into a period of, as you mentioned, regarding the governor's recommendations by March 1st, we're moving into a hybrid situation that we're offering folks that want to be back in seat. So that hybrid would involve being in person for partial of the week, while still remaining remote for the other part of the week. And of course, we still maintain the option for those who don't want their children back yet in seat at all with a complete remote option. So we're offering both as we're moving forward.
How does this work with the teachers? Because it seems like they must be working 24/7 right now to try to be able to satisfy both of those groups, the remote and the in-person.
So yeah, so it is a little bit more in the way of work and work simultaneously, because you've got students that are in seat, and you also have students that are at home at the same time. So that does become a logistical challenge for teachers. While we have half the group that's in seat during that time, the other half of the class is at home working on asynchronous types of tasks and receiving at that time their intervention support or social work support or those types of things. So we try to cluster activities and services throughout the day that pairs with the teacher's schedule as best as possible, so that the students are engaged all day, but not necessarily having to have that teacher with them all day.
I'm thinking the logistics that went into trying to make this happen. You had to have lost so many nights of sleep over this.
Yeah, logistically, it gets quite complicated when you're looking at everybody's schedules. And then of course, particularly at the secondary level, you've got all different types of certifications. So you've got teachers that can only teach certain types of classes. And then you pair that in the mix. It's a huge Rubik's Cube.
I was never good at that growing up. So I hope you were like one of the quick and the fast ones, because it continues to change as well. So just when you think you're getting a plan in place, you could be thrown another curveball.
Yeah. That's the thing about this whole COVID environment, is always expect the unexpected. It's a very fluid environment, and having to shift on the fly and move to different types of paradigms has been something that we've had to get used to, unfortunately.
So how does this work when it comes to taking attendance? If a child signs up and they want to go back to hybrid, do they have to commit to that? Or if maybe one day they don't want to go to in-person, can they stay at home? How does that work?
So we're asking families to commit to one or the other, and so you're coming back or you're staying remote. You have to pick one, for the remainder of the school year, and so attendance is taken in both of those venues per your choice. We're not setting up a system where folks are free to come in seat one day and stay remote the next, or gee, this week I want to be in seat and next week I'm going to be remote because that's what fits my schedule. It's too disruptive, and it's too difficult to contend with, to have people just coming and going as they please. So we're asking folks to have to make a commitment.
I also read a recent article where they were talking about how many students that really no one seems to know where they are, because districts have lost so many students during this. Have you been able to try to track some of your students, and is enrollment down? And do you anticipate if you get back to full in-person, those numbers will get back to where they were pre-pandemic?
So we are down in our district. We're down about 129 students from where we were in the fall of 19, and that was to be expected. All districts, I think, around us have seen a decline somewhat in enrollment as folks, have ventured off to get in-seat instruction, perhaps at a parochial school or some other private institution. And they may return, once we're back in seat. We're counting on we know of a few that said when you're back in seat, we'll be back. So I anticipate getting some of that enrollment back. We do have some students that I'll say, as you're alluding to, that are so-called missing students that were unaccounted for. And we've been reaching out to those families and trying to get a sense of, where are you at? Where, are you attending a different institution? And, there's still a few families we haven't been able to reach because their numbers are no longer valid or what have you. But we've done a fair amount of work to try and reach families that on our records were unaccounted for at the start of the school year.
I think about some of these kids that are being homeschooled right now. I'm so happy that was not an option when I was growing up.
It's difficult, and we do feel for the families, in terms of trying to contend with being at home and being an instructor in your home, as well as trying to work from home in your own job and trying to balance all of that. We know it's been extremely difficult. And that is why we have a lot of families who are clamoring to get back into some sense of normalcy with being back in seat.
So when you start the hybrid model, what does this mean for like some of the extra activities? Are you bringing those back to in person, or will those remain virtual?
So it'll be a mix. We're going to have in-seat activities, extracurriculars that'll occur. After hours, of course, athletics is resuming. So that is great. And we have teachers that'll be offering activities remote as well. So for those that are staying remote, there'll be activities to stay there, or if you're remote and you want to come in at after hours to an activity, that'll be available too. So it'll be a mix of we're trying to make it to whatever is desired.
So with that too, how confusing has this been? Because you have the governor is suggesting this, but yet you're also relying on information from the county as well to try to come up with these plans. And I know that the guidelines have changed as well.
Yes, guidelines have changed. So one of the major variables that districts were using was the Oakland County Health Department's risk chart. That was a degradation of scale from A to E, and it was based on the number of cases per million and healthcare hospital capacity. There was about 15 or so metrics that led to that score of an A to an E. And that scale now, the MDHHS has indicated that they're no longer using that scale for purposes of school closures or remote versus in-seat decision making. So, and that was a major variable that districts were using. So now, we're more or less reliant on our own local cases, looking at our local geographics and making that determination amongst ourselves versus a countywide portrait of evaluation. So it's forced us more into looking at our own locales for that decision making.
Well, and a lot of the school districts have said all along that they knew that the schools weren't necessarily where the spread was coming from. It was happening outside of the school building. But with that, I know that a lot of districts are also struggling with getting substitutes or even having enough teachers. So are you concerned with some of the teachers maybe coming back with more being, engaging more with some of the students that some could get COVID and then you have to start this quarantine process again?
So that was the concern that largely kept us remote for the duration that we were because of the fact of staffing. Because as you alluded to, the spread in schools, the research is showing that it's relatively low risk, and there's more and more research that's coming out that confirms that schools are relatively low risk for spread. But the issue is with the volume of the cases that we were seeing, particularly in our surge in late fall, in November, what that was doing was, because of the number of cases that we had in the county, we had so many people that were forced to quarantine because either they were positive themselves or they were exposed to somebody who was positive, that to proceed with staffing was extremely difficult. And the substitute pool right now is at an all-time low. We cannot get substitute teachers. They're just not available like they once used to be. The well is quite dry. And so if you're running an in-seat program and your teachers are having to quarantine, it's forcing you to interrupt your instruction and go remote. And we didn't want to get caught in this, well, we're in-seat instruction for 2 weeks and then we're forced to go remote because the teacher's got to quarantine or half the class has to quarantine. Now, the numbers in the county are such that we're not at the levels that we used to be. So by sheer volume, we sense that won't be as large of a risk factor, that we would have those staffing issues. Do we expect to have some? Yeah, we expect to have some, but certainly not to the extent that we would have had trying to do in-seat at the height of the surge.
So with that, this has to be difficult to try to explain to parents as well, because we still see statewide restaurants are still closed for indoor dining, but yet we're saying, hey, let's come back to the classroom. So what's it been like for you as the superintendent trying to get this message across to the parents?
Yeah, it's been extremely difficult, because folks generally don't get it. They don't get why, how can you have athletics and not have school? So there's a lot of comparing and contrasting, and you've got to look at each program, each type of situation differently. And of course, we're getting guidance, that gives us different guidance for athletics than we get guidance for in-class instruction. And so the guidance that we're given, it often conflicts with each other, which makes it difficult for us. But, when you're evaluating, small groups and social distancing and being masked and the protocols that surround things like athletics are much different than what they can be in a classroom. And so, that's why different rules have existed for different types of things. And for parents, it's been extremely difficult, and to explain it is hard. And you got some folks who just don't want to hear you because
Yeah, you add that into the mix as well.
Right.
So obviously 2021, we're all hopeful this year because of the vaccine. Have you and members of your team been offered the vaccine yet?
So we have many folks, teachers and staff around the district that have appointments. Some have fulfilled their vaccinations. Some have appointments that are coming up to get those vaccinations. We know that the volume of vaccinations are way under what was expected to be at this point, and we're being promised that more and more vaccinations are coming for folks to be able to get. So I think we'll see that certainly ramped up in the next few weeks. That most of our staff, by the beginning of March, even by mid-March, should be availed plenty of opportunity to get their vaccination.
So Dr. Schwarz, 2021, did you even make a New Year's resolution?
Well, we're just taking it day by day. We do think that certainly the things certainly seem on an upward trajectory, and we certainly are hopeful that full-time instruction and normalcy as we once knew it. We're optimistic for the fall that hopefully we'll be at that point come the new school year.
I'm sure we'll talk to you again before the end of the school year, but any plans as of right now about some of those end of the year celebrations, such as graduation?
So we are beginning to look at planning like graduation ceremonies. We are looking at our having them on site in our football stadium. That is in the planning right now. Prom is still a big question mark because I mean, prom is like a total defiance of social distancing just by the nature of prom. So prom probably will be something that will be a little more difficult. But honors convocations, graduations, yeah, we're looking at moving forward with those things. Now, whether honors convocations are virtual or not, it's going to depend on how the next few months go. But we'd love to do an in-person graduation, and we think that if things go on the trajectory they are, we should not have a problem with that come the end of May. So
It really does seem like it's, plan for the worst, but hope for the best.
exactly. Yep. That's exactly that's what it's been.
Well, we definitely hope 2021 is a bit better and a bit calmer as well, because I could only imagine the amount of hours that you guys have put in trying to navigate this crisis. So
Yeah.
thank you again to your team, and here's to a better 2021.
Well, we appreciate you. Thank you so much for having us.